Russian tanks have become sitting ducks for Ukrainian attacks. Matt, what did you find out?
Yeah, Willie, well, the Admiral just set me up perfectly for this. We can file the tanks under the many, many mistakes that the Russians have made in their assault on Ukraine. You know, I was one of those people who came out in the early days of this fight and said, or before the fight started, and said that, you know, the Russians are going to trounce the Ukrainians. I wasn't alone. We badly underestimated the Ukrainians and really overestimated the Russians. And the tanks are one of the reasons why the Russians' ground battle has been so weak, shocking the world, and has been a scandal for the Kremlin. And here's our report from Ukraine. These days, parts of Ukraine's countryside look like tank graveyards. But something even more spooky stands out. So many of these Russian tanks died the same grisly deaths. They were decapitated, their turrets blown completely off. It's all because of the so-called jack-in-the-box defect that's turned Russia's tanks into hearses. Just look at this crater. This tank was hit, but what ultimately destroyed it was the explosion of its own ammunition. Like in the T-72, which the Soviet Union built by the tens of thousands beginning in the 1970s. The tank's front is heavily armored, built for a head-on attack against Western tanks, but its sides and turret are much more vulnerable. Even worse for Russian tank crews, they're sitting on an almost completely exposed ammunition carousel, built to make the T-72 more streamlined. But when the tank's ammunition explodes, it turns the turret into a cauldron, fueled by its own ammunition, roasting inside its own armor. Eventually, the top pops off. The turret itself can fly high into the air, like this one, which plunged back to lodge inside an apartment building. Take me on a tour of the tank. What do you think happened here?
As for this exact tank, I think it was hit twice. First of all, it was stopped by heavy artillery, and after that, it was totally disabled by javelin or in-law.
Yeah.
So that's the place where all the fire started.
Okay.
And after that, it ignited all ammunition inside.
So the men inside were just cooked by their own ammunition.
Vaporized.
So the men inside, when they find their bodies, there's just almost nothing left.
Nothing left at all. No bones, nothing.
The Soviet designers couldn't have anticipated modern anti-tank weapons like the British NLAW or the American Javelin, which feature a dive bomb approach. Nor could they have known about drones. Ukraine is even working on arming small commercial drones with simple bombs that can be dropped from above.
Our army have this bomb, and this is just a copy, and now we are in that moment that we are just going to try to test how to bomb with this drone.
Once you get these going, you can just fly them over tanks and drop bombs onto the tanks.
Yes, this bombs exactly against tank.
The devastation wrought on Russia's tanks have led some military analysts to speculate the tank, one of the 20th century's most effective artillery weapons, may be dead. But many say Russia's tank problem is as tactical as it is technical.
The Russian tanks operate more or less on their own without the support of the infantry and without the support of other elements. That's when we have such precise hits that ignite the carousel and blow off the entire turret.
It's one of the reasons why military analysts say rumors of the tank's death may have been greatly exaggerated.
There is no substitute for a tank. There's no substitute for its firepower, for its protection, and the damage that it can cause.
But like any animal in a hostile new habitat, today's tanks will need to evolve or die. And I got to emphasize here, Willie, the fact is that the problems with the tank, as I mentioned in the story, are as tactical as they are technical. And a lot of those tactical issues were just mistakes within the rank and file of the Russian military, some of their senior officers using and employing the tank on the battlefield in a way that Western observers said was just blatantly wrong and obviously incorrect. They've learned a lot of lessons from that. And that's one of the reasons why we saw so many advances by the Russian ground forces in the Donbass region in the east. But they haven't been learning fast enough because of those weapons. The NLAWs, the Javelins, they're coming fast and furious, and there's already been $10 billion in just U.S. aid alone